She thought the hardest part of loving a billionaire would be fitting into his world. Then his ex threatened to destroy her bakery, her reputation, and everything her dead mother had built unless she convinced him to stay silent about years of fraud. The struggling baker had two choices: save herself by walking away, or risk everything to stand beside the man she loved. Welcome back to another enriching story, my beautiful Pride family. Your unwavering support means the world to me, and I'm committed to bringing you even more heartwarming stories for you all, as I continue to grow and evolve every day. If you're joining us for the first time, please drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to officially become part of our Pride family. The wedding cake was going to be the death of her. Ava Harper gripped the steering wheel of her ancient delivery van with one hand while the other braced against the passenger seat, as if sheer willpower could prevent the 5-tier masterpiece in the back from toppling. The winter storm had turned Manhattan into a snow globe from hell, visibility nearly zero, the wipers fighting a losing battle against ice and slush. She should have cancelled, should have called the bride, explained that no cake was worth dying for. But the deposit from this wedding was the only thing standing between her and eviction, between keeping her mother's bakery alive and watching 20 years of legacy crumble into nothing. "Just 2 more blocks," she whispered, leaning forward to peer through the windshield. 2 more blocks, and you can afford February rent, and maybe fix the broken oven. The universe, as usual, wasn't listening. The black Mercedes came out of nowhere, sliding through the intersection just as Ava's van crawled forward. She slammed the brakes, the van fishtailed, and for one horrible suspended moment she saw her entire life flash before her eyes. Not the good parts, but the receipt for $800 worth of fondant and Italian buttercream, currently riding in the back. The van spun, she screamed, and then everything stopped with a sickening crunch of metal on metal. Silence, except for the frantic hammering of her heart and the distant wail of car horns. Ava sat frozen, hands still locked on the wheel, breath coming in sharp gasps that fogged the air. The cake. Oh God, the cake. She scrambled out of the driver's seat, ignoring the icy wind that cut through her flour-dusted sweater, and yanked open the back doors with shaking hands. The cake stood perfectly intact, 5 tiers of winter-white perfection, decorated with hand-piped sugar flowers that had taken her 3 days to create. Not a single petal out of place. She nearly sobbed with relief. "Are you hurt?" The voice came from behind her, deep and rich with genuine concern, the kind of voice that belonged in old movies. Ava spun around, prepared to apologize, prepared to grovel if necessary, and forgot how to breathe. The man standing in the snow looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread on what billionaires wore to ruin women's lives. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair already dusted with snowflakes, and a face so devastating it should have come with a warning label. And she'd just demolished what had to be a car worth hundreds of thousands. "I am so sorry," she started, words tumbling over themselves. "I didn't see you, the storm. I was trying to. The cake is fine, but your car, I'll pay for it somehow. I have insurance. I mean, it's terrible insurance, but it's something. Is the cake all right?" He interrupted, and something in his tone made her actually look at him instead of spiraling into panic. He was smiling, just slightly. Dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin warm despite the freezing wind. Not angry, not annoyed, just watching her with a curiosity that felt intimate somehow. "The cake is perfect," she managed. "Your Mercedes is not. The Mercedes can be replaced." He moved closer, and she caught the scent of expensive cologne and winter air. "You're shaking." "It's freezing, and I just had a minor car accident and potential financial ruin, so yes, I'm shaking." That almost smile deepened into something real, something that transformed his face from merely handsome into absolutely unfair. "Where are you trying to deliver this miraculous, indestructible cake?" She told him the address, 3 blocks north, and watched his expression shift into something firm, and decided, You're not driving in this. You'll never make it. And I refuse to be responsible for the death of that cake after it survived our collision." He pulled out his phone, typed something rapidly. "My building is right here. We'll take the cake inside. I'll have my driver deliver it in something with actual working brakes, and you're going to get warm before you pass out in the snow. I can't just leave my van, already handled. My security will have it towed somewhere that can fix it." He moved past her to look into the van, and she saw his eyebrows rise slightly. "That is genuinely magnificent. You made this?" Pride swelled in her chest despite everything. "Every inch. Then it's definitely going to arrive safely, and you're definitely coming inside before hypothermia sets in." He shrugged out of his overcoat, and before she could protest, he draped it around her shoulders. It was still warm from his body, heavy and soft and smelling like him. "I'm Damien, by the way." Damien Hawk. Of course he was. Because she hadn't just crashed into any random Mercedes, she'd crashed into the Damien Hawk, founder of Hawk Industries, the man whose face appeared on Forbes covers with alarming regularity. New York's most eligible bachelor, and probably the most untouchable human being she'd ever encountered. "Ava Harper," she said weakly. "Professional disaster on wheels. Professional baker from what I can see." He gestured to the cake with something like reverence. "Shall we?" She should have insisted on staying with her van, on handling this herself, on not stepping one foot into the gleaming glass tower behind him that probably had a doorman who earned more than she did. But the wind chose that moment to gust hard enough to nearly knock her sideways, and Damien's hand came up to steady her, warm and strong against her elbow, and she found herself nodding. What followed felt surreal. Damien Hawk, billionaire, carrying her wedding cake himself through the marble lobby of his building, while she trailed behind in her ratty sweater and jeans, leaving puddles of melted snow on floors that probably cost more per square foot than her apartment cost per month. The doorman didn't even blink, just murmured, "Good evening, Mr. Hawk," like his boss regularly returned home carrying elaborate pastries and snow-covered bakers. The elevator ride to the penthouse happened in silence. Ava hyper-aware of how close they were standing, how carefully he was holding her work, the way his eyes kept drifting to her in the mirrored walls. She looked like a drowned rat. He looked like sin in a suit. The universe had a terrible sense of humor. The penthouse doors opened directly into a space that made her stomach drop. Beautiful windows overlooking Manhattan, furniture that belonged in design museums, art on the walls that might have been original Rothkos. And in the middle of all that carefully curated perfection, Damien set down her cake on a dining table like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Where should I tell my driver to deliver this?" he asked, pulling out his phone again. She gave him the venue address, watched him type and send the message with terrifying efficiency, and then stood dripping on his probably priceless floors while panic started to set in. She didn't belong here. This was insane. She needed to leave before she broke something or said something stupid or... "You're spiraling," Damien observed, pocketing his phone. "I can see it happening. Stop. I'm getting your floor wet. I have people who clean floors. I don't have people who create masterpieces like that." He nodded toward the cake, then moved to a closet and returned with the softest cashmere blanket she'd ever seen, cream-colored and probably worth more than her oven. "Come sit, please." The please did something to her, made it sound less like an order and more like he actually wanted her company. She let him guide her to a leather sofa that felt like sitting on a cloud, let him wrap the blanket around her shoulders, and tried not to pass out when he disappeared into what she assumed was the kitchen and returned with 2 mugs of hot chocolate that smelled like actual melted heaven. "You just keep hot chocolate ready?" she asked, accepting the mug with numb fingers. "I have a very efficient kitchen, and I may have a weakness for good chocolate." He settled into the chair across from her, long legs stretched out, tie loosened. Looking simultaneously exhausted and more alert than anyone had a right to be at that time. "Tell me about the bakery. What makes you think I have a bakery?" "Professional intuition. Also, you have flour in your hair." His smile was gentle, not mocking. "And you said, 'My mother's bakery,' when you were panicking earlier. You didn't think I was listening, but I was." Something about the way he said it, like her words actually mattered, like he'd been paying attention even in the chaos, made her defenses crack just slightly. She took a sip of the hot chocolate, it was perfect, and felt the warmth start to chase away the bone-deep cold. "Sweetness and grace in the East Village," she heard herself say. "My mom opened it 23 years ago. She died 2 years ago, left it to me, and I've been trying to keep it alive ever since." Trying? The understanding in his voice nearly undid her. Failing, mostly. Rent keeps going up. Equipment keeps breaking. I can't afford to hire help, and I'm competing with Instagram bakeries that have venture capital funding and marketing teams. She laughed, but it came out bitter. I'm terrified every single day that I'm going to fail her memory. She stopped, horrified. She just vomited her entire tragic life story at a complete stranger, a billionaire stranger who definitely had better things to do than listen to her problems. "I'm sorry. I don't know why You don't need to hear all that." Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them, something that made her pulse kick up for reasons that had nothing to do with the car accident. He was looking at her like she mattered, like he could see past the mess and the stress and the fear to something worth knowing. "Can I try a piece?" he asked, nodding toward the cake. "I know it's for a client, but you must have tasted it while you were working. Is it as good as it looks?" "Better," she said, because false modesty had never been her style. "It's champagne cake with raspberry filling and vanilla bean buttercream. I developed the recipe myself." "Then I'm definitely trying it." He stood, moved to the cake, and carefully, reverent even, used a knife from his kitchen to extract a small piece from the back where it wouldn't show. He plated it properly, brought it back, and she watched, heart in her throat, as this man who probably ate at Michelin-starred restaurants every week took a bite of her work. His eyes closed, and the sound he made was obscene. "This," he said, voice slightly rough, "tastes so yummy." Ava felt heat flood her cheeks. The way he was looking at her now, eyes dark and intense, made her feel things she had no business feeling. "It's just cake." He took another bite, slower this time, savoring. "This is extraordinary." The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility and danger, and something that felt terrifyingly like connection. Then his phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He glanced at it, and Ava watched his entire body go rigid, jaw clenching, something dark and cold flickering across his features. The voice on the other end was female, sharp enough that Ava could hear it even from across the space. "You can't avoid me forever, Damien. We have unfinished business." "This isn't the time, Celestine," he said, voice flat and hard in a way it hadn't been moments before. "It's never the time with you, darling, but we both know you'll come around, you always do." He ended the call, set the phone down with careful control, and when he looked at Ava again, the vulnerability was locked away behind walls she could almost see sliding into place. "I should let you get home," he said. "I'll have my driver take you once the cake is delivered." "Is everything okay?" "Yay, I'm fine. Just ancient history trying to become current news. Nothing you need to worry about." "Damien." He looked startled that she'd used his name, and something in his expression softened slightly. "It's complicated and ugly, and I don't want to drag you into my mess when you have your own storms to weather. What if I don't mind a little mess?" The smile that ghosted across his face was sad and sweet at the same time. "You're going to be dangerous to my carefully controlled life, aren't you?" "Probably. I did just crash into you." He laughed, real and surprised, and the sound wrapped around her heart like a promise. "Fair point." They talked until midnight, the conversation flowing like they'd known each other for years instead of hours, and when his driver finally arrived to take Ava home, Damien walked her to the elevator like he couldn't quite bear to let her go. "Can I see you again?" he asked, and the hope in his voice made her reckless. The bakery opens at 7. I'm usually there by 5, prepping. That's obscenely early. That's the life. He smiled, reached out, and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The brush of his fingers against her skin felt electric. Then I'll see you at 5. You don't mean that. I never say things I don't mean, Ava. The way he said her name, like he was tasting it, memorizing it, made her shiver for reasons that had nothing to do with temperature. When the elevator doors closed between them, she pressed her hand to her racing heart and wondered what the hell had just happened. Damien Hawke showed up at her bakery at 5 the next morning with coffee, and the smile on his face when she opened the door, covered in flour and exhausted, looked like she was the best thing he'd seen all week. "You actually came," she said, shocked. "I told you I would." He stepped inside, looked around at her small, cramped, wonderful space with its ancient ovens and mismatched mixing bowls and shelves lined with her mother's recipe books, and something in his expression went soft. "This is nice." He set the coffee down, rolled up the sleeves of his obscenely expensive shirt, and looked at her expectantly. "Put me to work." "You're kidding." "Do I look like I'm kidding?" He didn't, and for the next 2 hours, Ava experienced the surreal pleasure of teaching a billionaire how to properly fold croissant dough. He was terrible at it, his corporate precision utterly unsuited to the organic feel required for pastry, but he tried with such genuine focus that she couldn't stop smiling. When he got frustrated, she stepped behind him, put her hands over his, and guided him through the motion. The moment her body pressed against his back, the world narrowed to just the two of them. She felt him go still, felt the way his breathing changed, heard the slight catch when her fingers wrapped around his wrists. "Like this," she said, voice coming out softer than intended. "You have to feel it, not force it. You're making it very difficult to concentrate on dough," he murmured, and the roughness in his tone sent heat pooling low in her stomach. She stepped back quickly, flustered, and he turned to face her, with eyes so dark they looked nearly black. The air between them crackled. "Ava," he said, and it sounded like a question and a prayer at the same time. The timer on the oven saved them both, the sharp beep shattering the moment. She fled to pull out the morning's first batch of sourdough, grateful for the excuse to hide her burning face, and tried to remember how to breathe normally. He stayed until she opened at 7, drinking coffee and asking her about recipes and techniques, watching her work with an intensity that should have made her nervous but somehow just made her feel seen. When the first customers started arriving, she expected him to leave, to return to his world of board meetings and power plays. Instead, he bought a ridiculous quantity of pastries, charmed someone from down the street into blushing like a schoolgirl, and told everyone who would listen that this was the best bakery in Manhattan. "You don't have to do this," Ava said when there was finally a lull. "Do what?" "Slum it with the normal people. I'm sure you have very important billionaire things to do." He looked at her for a long moment, something complicated moving behind his eyes. What if this is the only place I want to be? Her heart did something acrobatic in her chest. "Damien, I know this is fast. I know we just met. I know you have every reason to think this is insane." He moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "But I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since you nearly killed me with a wedding cake. And I'd really like permission to keep showing up here, keep getting to know you, keep—" He paused, something vulnerable crossing his face. "Keep feeling like maybe I'm more than just my last name." How was she supposed to resist that? How was she supposed to protect herself against someone who looked at her like she held the secrets to the universe in her flour-dusted hands? "Okay," she whispered. "Okay? Keep showing up. Let's see what happens." The smile that broke across his face was brilliant and boyish and absolutely devastating, and when he left an hour later, he squeezed her hand in a way that felt like a promise. He kept showing up, and what happened was everything. Over the next 2 weeks, Damien became a fixture in her small, chaotic world. He appeared just before closing, sleeves already rolled up, ready to help her clean or prep or simply keep her company while she worked on custom orders. He brought her ingredients she'd only dreamed of touching: rare vanilla from Madagascar, single-origin chocolate from Ecuador, saffron that probably cost more per ounce than gold, and never made it feel like charity. Instead, he'd set them on her work table like offerings and ask, almost shy, if she'd be willing to create something with them. The first time she used his vanilla, she made a simple buttercream and had him taste it. The sound he made, low and almost pained with pleasure, sent shivers down her spine. "You're going to ruin me for all other desserts," he said, licking the spoon clean in a way that absolutely should not have been as erotic as it was. "I think that's the plan," she managed, trying not to stare at his mouth. "Good." His eyes locked on hers, dark and intent. "Ruin me, Ava. I want to be ruined by you." The double meaning hung in the air between them, heavy and hot, and she had to turn away before she did something crazy, like climb him, like a tree in the middle of her bakery. But the attraction was becoming impossible to ignore. Every accidental touch, his hand brushing hers when he passed her a bowl, felt electric. Every time he leaned close to watch her pipe decorations, she became hyper-aware of his breathing, his warmth, the expensive scent of him mixing with sugar and butter. The way he looked at her, like she was something precious and desired and utterly captivating, made her feel things she'd never felt before. One evening, she was working on a particularly intricate cake, her neck aching from hunching over the piping bag, when Damien's hands came up to her shoulders and began kneading the tight muscles with perfect pressure. She groaned before she could stop herself, and his hands stilled. "Sorry. Should I?" "Oh no, don't stop. I really needed that," she breathed, and felt his quiet laugh rumble through his chest. He worked the knots from her shoulders with skilled fingers, and she let her head fall forward, eyes closing, lost in the sensation. When his thumbs pressed into a particularly tight spot at the base of her neck, she made a sound that was borderline obscene. "You have no idea what you do to me," he said, voice low and rough near her ear. "The way you bite your lip when you're concentrating, I want to bite it for you." Her eyes flew open, heat flooding through her. "Damien, the sounds you make when something feels good, I want to spend hours learning what other sounds I can pull from you." His hands stilled on her shoulders, grip tightening slightly. "Tell me to stop, and I will. Tell me this is just friendly, and I'll never bring it up again. But Ava, I need you to know that I'm in so deep already, I can't see the surface anymore." She turned on her stool to face him, and the hunger in his expression stole her breath. This wasn't a game. This wasn't boredom. This was real want, etched into every line of his beautiful face. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "Of me? Of this? Of wanting something I can't have, someone I can't keep. You're Damien Hawke, and I'm just—" He cut her off by cupping her face in his hands, thumbs stroking her cheekbones with devastating gentleness. "You're not just anything. You're brilliant and talented, and so beautiful it hurts to look at you sometimes. You make me laugh. You make me feel like maybe I'm worth something beyond the money. And I am terrified too, because I've never wanted anyone the way I want you." She wanted to kiss him so badly her entire body ached with it, but fear still held her frozen. He seemed to sense it, because he pulled back, smiled softly, and changed the subject to ask about the cake she was working on. The rest of the evening continued in their familiar rhythm, but something had shifted, the air charged with possibility and promise. The next night, he brought dinner. Real food, because you need to eat more than sugar, and they sat on the floor of her bakery after closing, surrounded by the comforting smell of bread and chocolate, sharing Thai food straight from the containers. "Tell me about how life was while growing up," she said, watching him expertly use chopsticks. "Which version, the public one or the real one?" "The real one." He was quiet for a moment, something painful flickering across his features. "Lonely. My parents were rarely home, always chasing the next deal, the next acquisition, the next rung on the social ladder. I was raised by a rotating staff of nannies who were professional and kind, but never stayed long enough to really know me. Boarding school from age 10, expected to excel at everything, never allowed to fail or show weakness. I learned very early that people wanted proximity to the hawk name and fortune, not to the actual person wearing it. That sounds horrible. It was normal for that world. But it taught me not to trust easily, not to let people in. He looked at her, eyes serious. Which is why what I feel with you is so terrifying and so important. You didn't want anything from me. You just wanted your cake to survive and your van to be fixable. It was refreshing. So I'm refreshing? Like a palate cleanser? He laughed, shaking his head. You're everything, and you have noodle on your face. Before she could wipe it away, he reached out and gently brushed his thumb across her lower lip, collecting the errant sauce. Then, eyes locked on hers, he brought his thumb to his mouth and licked it clean. The gesture should have been playful. Instead, it was incendiary. You can't do things like that, she said, voice shaky. Why not? Because it makes me want things. What things, Ava? He leaned closer, voice dropping to a near whisper. Tell me what you want. I'll give you anything, everything. Just say the words. She could barely breathe. I want to stop being afraid. Something fierce and protective flashed in his eyes. Of me? Of this feeling too good. Of losing it. Of not being enough when you realize I'm just a regular person with debt and anxiety and a disaster of a life. He set down his food, moved until he was right in front of her, close enough that she could count his eyelashes. Can I tell you what I see when I look at you? She nodded, not trusting her voice. I see a woman who gets up every day to honor her mother's memory, who creates art with her hands that makes people cry with joy on their wedding days. Who's fighting with everything? She has to keep a dream alive, even when the world makes it almost impossible. Who's kind to every customer who walks through that door, who remembers their names and their orders and asks about their lives? Who makes me feel, for the first time in my entire life, like maybe I'm worth something beyond my bank balance? Tears pricked her eyes. Damien, you are not just anything, he continued, intensity burning in every word. You are extraordinary. And I know I come from money and power and all these things that make you think we're from different worlds, but Ava, none of that matters to me. The only thing that matters is this, us, the way I feel when I'm here with you. A tear slipped down her cheek, and he caught it with his thumb, infinitely gentle. I'm falling for you, he said, voice raw with honesty. I'm falling so hard I can't see straight, and it terrifies me because I've never let myself fall for anyone in a long time. But I'm choosing to trust this, to trust you. Can you try to trust me too? She had so many reasons to say no, to protect herself, to remember that girls like her didn't get fairy tale endings with men like him. But looking into his eyes, seeing the vulnerability and hope and genuine feeling reflected there, she couldn't make herself walk away. I'm falling too, she whispered. And it's terrifying. We'll be terrified together then. His smile was soft and sweet. I'm pretty good at facing scary things when I'm not alone. This time, when he leaned in slowly, she didn't pull away. His lips brushed hers, feather-light, a question more than a demand. She answered by closing the distance, kissing him properly, and feeling the entire world narrow to just this, just them, just the perfect rightness of his mouth on hers. He kissed like he did everything else, with focus and intensity and a tenderness that made her chest ache. One hand cupped her face, while the other slid into her hair, angling her head to deepen the kiss, and when his tongue traced her lower lip, she opened for him with a sound that was embarrassingly needy. The kiss went from sweet to consuming in seconds, and she couldn't get enough. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and he made a rough sound against her mouth that sent heat spiraling through her entire body. When they finally broke apart, he pressed his forehead to hers, eyes still closed. I've wanted to do that since the moment I saw you in the snow, he admitted. You wanted to kiss the crazy baker who crashed into you? I wanted to kiss the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, who looked at me like I was human instead of a walking bank account. He pulled back slightly, eyes searching hers. Was it okay? The fact that he was asking, that he cared about her answer, made her fall a little bit more. More than okay. His smile was brilliant. Good, because I'd really like to do it again. They did, there on the floor of her bakery, surrounded by the smell of sugar and dreams, kissing like teenagers and falling like skydivers, and Ava let herself believe, just for a moment, that maybe fairy tales could happen after all. The next week was a haze of growing intimacy and escalating attraction. Damien showed up every evening without fail, and the bakery became their cocoon, separate from the world and its expectations. They talked about everything: childhood dreams, worst fears, favorite books, the meaning of success, whether pineapple belonged on pizza. They agreed to disagree on that one. He told her about building his company from his father's foundation, about the pressure and the loneliness and the constant awareness that people wanted to use him. She told him about her mother's slow decline, the moment she'd had to choose between culinary school dreams and coming home to care for her, the strange grief of losing someone while they were still breathing. And through it all, the tension between them built like a storm waiting to break. Every brush of hands felt charged, every look lingered too long. The air crackled when they were close, and they were close constantly. He'd crowd into her space while she worked, ostensibly to watch her technique, but the heat of his body behind hers made her hands shake. She'd lean over him to grab supplies, and the way his eyes darkened when her hair brushed his shoulder made breathing difficult. One night, she was piping flowers on a birthday cake, tongue between her teeth in concentration, when she felt him move close behind her. Not touching, just there, his presence a warm weight at her back. "I love watching you work," he said quietly. "Your face when you're creating, it's like watching someone touch the divine." "That's very poetic for butter and sugar," she managed, hyper-aware of how close he was. "It's not about the ingredients. It's about what you do with them, how you transform them into something that brings joy." His breath ghosted across her neck. "I love the way you bite your lip when you're concentrating. It makes me want to bite it for you." She nearly dropped the piping bag. You said that before. I meant it before. I mean it more now." His voice had gone rough, dangerous. "You drive me out of my mind, Ava. I can't think about anything but getting you alone and making you forget your own name." Heat flooded through her, pooling low and insistent. "Damien, tell me to stop and I will," he murmured, still not touching her, just surrounding her with his presence. "Tell me to leave and I'll go." "But God, Ava, I need you to know that I'm barely holding on to control here. The things I want to do to you, the way I want to make you feel." She spun around, nearly bumping into him, and the hunger in his eyes stole her breath. "What's stopping you?" His jaw clenched. "I'm trying to be good, trying to be a gentleman, trying not to rush you into something you're not ready for." "What if I'm ready?" The sound he made was somewhere between a groan and a prayer. "Don't say things like that unless you mean them." "I mean them." She was trembling but certain, terrified but sure. For one suspended moment he just stared at her, breathing hard, visibly fighting for control. Then something in his restraint snapped. He cupped her face in both hands and kissed her like a man starving, like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning, deep and desperate and absolutely consuming. She kissed back with equal fervor, months of loneliness and wanting pouring into the connection of their mouths, her hands fisting in his hair while his wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against him. The evidence of his desire pressed against her hip, hard and unmistakable, and the small, shocked sound she made only seemed to inflame him further. He walked her backward until her back hit the workbench, never breaking the kiss, one hand sliding up her ribs to cup her round body part through her thin t-shirt. She gasped into his mouth, arching into his touch, and he made that rough sound again, the one that vibrated through her entire body. "I've wanted to taste you since the moment I saw you," he said against her lips, voice wrecked. "And I promise, I'll take my time savoring every inch. Please," she breathed, and that single word seemed to undo him. He lifted her onto the workbench like she weighed nothing, stepped between her thighs, and kissed his way down her throat while his hands mapped her body with reverent intensity. When his mouth found the sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder, she made a sound she'd never made before, needy and high, and felt him smile against her skin. "I love the sounds you make," he murmured, hands sliding under her shirt to stroke bare skin. "I want to learn all of them." This was happening. This was real. And the part of her brain still capable of thought was screaming that they were in her bakery, that the windows weren't covered, that this was reckless and crazy, and he pulled back slightly, breathing hard, eyes so dark they looked black. "Not here," he said, voice rough. "Not in your bakery where anyone could see you. See this. You deserve better than that. Come home with me." The trip to his penthouse was a blur of heated looks and barely restrained touching in the back of his car, his driver maintaining professional silence while Damien held her hand like a lifeline, thumbs stroking over her knuckles in a rhythm that matched her racing heart. When they finally reached his building, he pulled her into the elevator, and the moment the doors closed, he had her pressed against the wall, mouth claiming hers with barely leashed hunger. "I'm trying so hard to be slow," he said against her lips, "trying to be gentle. But Ava, the way I want you, it's overwhelming. Show me," she challenged, breathless. "Show me how you want me." He made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a groan. "You're going to be the death of me." The penthouse doors opened directly into his space, and this time she barely noticed the luxury, too focused on the man pulling her toward his bedroom. The one who stopped every few steps to kiss her like he couldn't bear not to. The one who looked at her like she was everything. His bedroom was all dark wood and soft lighting, minimalist and masculine. But she barely registered any of it, because Damien was there, turning her to face him, eyes searching hers, with an intensity that bordered on painful. "Last chance to change your mind," he said. "Because once I have you, Ava, once I know what you taste like, what you feel like, I'm never going to be able to let you go." He kissed her slowly this time, deeply, like they had all the time in the world, hands cradling her face with devastating gentleness. "Come here," he murmured against her lips. "Let me show you exactly how a man worships the woman he can't live without." He undressed her slowly, reverently, kissing each new inch of exposed skin like it was sacred, murmuring praise that made her flush from head to toe. When she stood before him in just her underwear, she had a moment of panic, of awareness that she was regular and soft and nothing like the models he probably usually dated. But the look on his face stopped that spiral immediately. He looked awestruck, hungry, like she was a masterpiece he couldn't quite believe he got to touch. "You're so beautiful," he said, voice rough. "I need you to understand something. When I touch you, it's not just desire, it's devotion." Then his hands were on her, mapping every curve, every line, learning her body like he was memorizing scripture. He laid her on his bed, silk sheets cool against her heated skin, and stripped off his own clothes with economical grace. She got one brief glimpse of him, gorgeous and hard and so perfectly made it seemed unfair, before he was covering her body with his, skin to skin, the sensation so overwhelming she gasped. "I've got you," he murmured, kissing her eyelids, her cheeks, her jaw. "I'm going to take care of you, make you feel so good. Just let go for me." He made good on his promise, kissing his way down her body with agonizing patience, learning every sensitive spot, every place that made her gasp or arch or whimper. When his mouth found her breast, tongue circling her nipple before sucking gently, she cried out, hands fisting in his hair. He smiled against her skin and did it again, slower, and she felt the sensation all the way to her toes. "I want to memorize every curve," he said, hands stroking her sides, her hips, her thighs. "Every sigh, every secret place that makes you moan my name." He continued his exploration, kissing down her stomach, pressing his mouth to her hip bones, the inside of her thighs, everywhere except where she desperately needed him. When she made a frustrated sound, he laughed, low and dark. "Patience, sweetheart, I told you I'd take my time." When his mouth finally found her center, she nearly came apart immediately. His groan of appreciation vibrated through her, and the first stroke of his tongue made her see stars. He worshipped her with his mouth, learning her rhythm, what made her writhe, what made her chant his name like a prayer. When he added his fingers, curling them just right while his tongue worked her most sensitive spot, she shattered completely, crying out as pleasure rolled through her in overwhelming waves. He worked her through it, gentling his touch as she came down, pressing soft kisses to her trembling thighs. When he finally moved back up her body, his lips were wet and his eyes were blazing. "You taste like heaven and sin mixed together," he said, voice wrecked, "and I'm never going to get enough." She pulled him down for a kiss, tasting herself on his tongue, and felt his hard length press against her hip. She reached down to wrap her hand around him, and the sound he made was the most erotic thing she'd ever heard. "Ava," he groaned, hips flexing into her touch. "If you do that, this is going to be over embarrassingly fast." "I want to make you feel good too," she said. She guided him to her entrance, and he paused, forehead pressed to hers, breathing hard. "Are you sure?" he asked. "We can stop, we can." "I'm sure," she interrupted. He entered her slowly, carefully, watching her face for any sign of discomfort. The stretch was intense, perfect, and when he was fully seated inside her, they both groaned. He stilled, giving her time to adjust, pressing kisses to her face, her neck, whispering how perfect she felt, how good, how tight. When she rolled her hips experimentally, he made a choked sound and began to move, slow and deep, each thrust deliberate and controlled. He made love to her like he had all the time in the world, like learning her pleasure was more important than his own, angling his hips to hit that spot inside her that made her see stars. "You're so beautiful when you let go," he said, one hand sliding down to where they were joined, fingers finding her sensitive bundle of nerves. "I want to watch you fall apart in my arms every night for the rest of my life." The combination of his words, his touch, the feeling of him moving inside her, was too much. She felt the tension coiling tighter, higher, and when he leaned down to capture her mouth in a searing kiss, she broke apart again, even more intense than before. She felt him follow her over the edge, his rhythm faltering as he groaned her name, and the feeling of him pulsing inside her extended her own pleasure until she thought she might actually die from it. They collapsed together, breathing hard, hearts hammering in sync. He rolled to the side but kept her close, pulling her against his chest, pressing kisses to her sweat-dampened hair. They lay tangled together as their breathing slowly returned to normal, and Ava felt something shift in her chest, something huge and terrifying and wonderful. When Damien tilted her face up to kiss her, soft and sweet, she saw the same feeling reflected in his eyes. "I'm falling in love with you," he said quietly, like the confession was being pulled from somewhere deep inside him. "I know it's too soon. I know it's crazy, but Ava, I'm falling so hard." He gathered her closer, like he could keep them both safe from the fear through proximity alone. She believed him, there in the dark with the city lights painting patterns on the ceiling, wrapped in silk and safety and the warm weight of his arms. She believed in them. In this. In the possibility of something real and lasting. They made love again later, slower and sweeter, learning each other's bodies with the patience of people who knew they had time. And when Ava finally drifted to sleep, she felt more at peace than she had in years, like she'd finally found where she belonged. She woke to weak winter sunlight and the feeling of being watched. Damien was propped on one elbow, looking at her with such tenderness it made her chest ache. "Morning," she said, voice rough with sleep. "Good morning, beautiful." He leaned down to kiss her, soft and lingering. "I was just thinking how lucky I am that you crashed into me. Lucky I nearly destroyed your car. Lucky that the universe threw you directly into my path." His fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare back. I don't believe in fate, but if I did, I'd believe in this. Reality crept in with the daylight. The vast expanse of his bedroom, the evidence of wealth in every carefully chosen piece of furniture, the view that probably cost more per month than her entire bakery. It all reminded her that this was his world, and she was just visiting. "What are you thinking?" he asked, reading her expression with unnerving accuracy. "That this is beautiful. That you're beautiful. That I don't know how this works in the real world when we're so different." He shifted, cupping her face to make her look at him. "We're not different where it matters. We're both lonely people who found each other. We're both terrified of this. We're both choosing to try anyway. That's all that matters. Your life is so big. The money, the buildings, the business. I'm just a baker barely keeping her head above water." He kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. "I grew up with everything money could buy, and none of what actually matters. My parents loved their empire more than they ever loved me. They're still alive, still running their businesses, and I haven't spoken to either of them in 3 years. That world, the one you're worried about, it's lonely and cold and full of people who perform instead of feeling. You make me feel, Ava. You make me real." She kissed him, pouring her heart into it, trying to show him what her words couldn't quite capture. When they finally pulled apart, he was smiling, that soft, private smile that she was starting to think belonged only to her. "Stay," he said. "Spend the day with me. The bakery is closed on Sundays. You don't have to be anywhere. Just stay." She did, and it was perfect. They cooked breakfast together in his enormous kitchen, Damien proving to be surprisingly competent with an omelette, and ate while the city woke up below them. They talked and laughed and kissed until they ended up back in bed, making love in the morning light, taking their time and memorizing each other. Later, he pulled her into his shower, a glass monstrosity with 6 shower heads and enough space for a small party, and washed her hair with such care that she nearly cried. When she returned the favor, running her soapy hands over every inch of his perfect body, he pressed her against the tile and took her again, urgent and desperate, like he needed the connection more than air. "I can't get enough of you," he admitted, forehead pressed to hers as the water cascaded around them. "Is that normal?" "I don't know," she said honestly. "I've never felt anything like this before." They spent the afternoon on his couch, Ava curled against his side, while he read her passages from his favorite books, his voice a rumble in his chest that made her feel safe and cherished. When his phone buzzed repeatedly, he ignored it, attention focused entirely on her, and she felt the significance of that choice in every fiber of her being. It wasn't until she went to use the bathroom that she saw it, his phone face up on the counter, a text notification lighting up the screen. "Enjoy her while it lasts, but you and I both know how this ends. You always come back to me." The sender's contact was not saved. Ava's stomach dropped. She shouldn't have looked, it was private, but the words burned themselves into her brain. Who was that? An ex? A current something? What did "always come back" mean? When she returned to the living room, Damien was exactly where she'd left him, book in hand, looking peaceful and content. He smiled when he saw her, the expression so open and genuine that the doubt in her stomach felt like betrayal. "You okay?" he asked. She should have asked about the text, should have confronted him. But fear kept her silent, fear that the answer would shatter this fragile, perfect thing they'd built. So instead, she smiled and nodded and let him pull her back against his chest and tried to ignore the cold whisper of doubt that had taken root in her heart. They had 3 perfect weeks. Damien surprised her by secretly paying 3 months of her bakery's overdue rent, and when she found out, she'd been furious, feeling like charity case, like he was trying to buy her. They'd had their first real fight, voices raised in her cramped office, her accusing him of thinking money solved everything, him frustrated that she wouldn't just let him help. "This isn't charity," he'd finally said, voice raw. "This is me, loving you. This is me not being able to stand the thought of you losing your mother's legacy when I have the power to prevent it. Let me help you, Ava. Let me be part of your life, your dreams. Isn't that what people who love each other do? The fight had drained out of her at the word love, said so plainly, like it was obvious, like it was fact. She'd fallen into his arms and let him hold her, while she cried, relieved and grateful, and still a little scared of needing him this much. "I love you," she'd whispered against his chest. "I love you, and I really do not know how to stop." "I love you too," he'd said, tilting her face up to kiss her tears away. He took her to Paris on a long weekend, private jet and a suite overlooking the Eiffel Tower, and 3 days of pastry shops and cobblestone streets, and making love as the city sparkled below. He told her he wanted forever, and wrapped in his arms, with the world spread out beneath them, she'd believed it was possible. Back in New York, he began integrating her into his world, charity galas and rooftop parties, and society events that made her feel like an imposter in borrowed designer gowns. But Damien never left her side, his hand always in hers, introducing her with such pride in his voice that she started to believe she might actually belong there, with him. At a particularly lavish gala, she'd excused herself to find the restroom and overheard 2 women in designer everything talking by the bar. "How long do you think this one will last? A month? 2? Please, she's a baker from nowhere. Damien's slumming, but he'll get bored, he always does. I give it 3 weeks before he upgrades back to his usual type." Ava had fled to a balcony, fighting tears, all her insecurities roaring back to life. Of course this wouldn't last. Of course he'd realized she was just ordinary. Of course, "There you are." Damien's voice was soft behind her. "I saw you leave. What's wrong?" "Nothing. Just needed air." He turned her to face him, reading her expression with unnerving accuracy. "You were crying." It wasn't a question. She tried to smile, to brush it off, but he cupped her face and waited until she met his eyes. "You don't need to fit into their world, Ava. You are my world. Everything else, the money, the status, the society games, none of it matters. You matter. This matters." He kissed her, soft and sure. "I don't care what anyone thinks or says. I love you. Only you." She believed him when he said it. Believed it when he took her home and made love to her with aching tenderness. Believed it when he held her through the night like she was something precious. But 3 days later, the blonde woman appeared at the gala, and everything changed. Celestine Vale moved through the crowd like she owned it, all sharp beauty and calculated grace, and when her eyes landed on Damien, the smile that curved her lips was pure venom. She approached them with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what damage she was about to cause. "Damien, darling," she said, voice smooth as silk and twice as cold. "It's been too long." Every muscle in Damien's body went rigid. "Celestine, aren't you going to introduce me to your friend?" Her eyes raked over Ava with undisguised assessment, finding her lacking. "Ava, this is Celestine, an old acquaintance. Celestine, this is Ava Harper, my girlfriend." The word girlfriend should have made Ava feel secure. Instead, the way Celestine's smile sharpened made her stomach drop. "Girlfriend. How sweet. I remember when Damien and I were at that stage. Such innocent times." Her hand landed on Damien's arm, proprietary and intimate. "We really should catch up properly, Damien. We have so much unfinished business." "We have nothing to discuss," Damien said, voice hard in a way Ava had never heard before. "Excuse us." He pulled Ava away, but not before she saw the promise in Celestine's eyes, the certainty that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. That night, Damien made love to her with desperate intensity, like he was trying to prove something, or perhaps trying to forget, and when he thought she was asleep, she heard him whisper against her hair, "I'm sorry." She didn't ask what he was apologizing for. She was too afraid of the answer. Celestine became a ghost that wouldn't stay buried. She appeared at Damien's office building 3 days after the gala. Ava knew because she'd stopped by to surprise him with lunch and saw the blonde woman stepping out of his private elevator, looking satisfied in a way that made Ava's skin crawl. When she asked Damien about it that evening, he'd brushed it off with obvious irritation. "She's persistent about some old business dealings. My lawyers are handling it. It's nothing for you to worry about." But the tension in his shoulders told a different story, and the way he pulled her into his arms that night, holding her almost desperately, made her wonder what he wasn't saying. The calls started after that, Damien's phone lighting up at odd hours with no caller ID, and each time he'd excuse himself, voice going cold and clipped in the other room. Ava tried to give him privacy, tried to trust him, but the secrecy felt like a wedge driving between them, splitting apart the intimacy they'd built. 1 week after the gala, Ava decided to surprise him at his office with the cupcakes he'd mentioned craving, the dark chocolate ones with salted caramel filling. His assistant waved her through with a smile, clearly recognizing her now, and she approached his office door just as Celestine's voice cut through the wood, sharp and threatening. "You can't put me off forever, Damien. We had an agreement. Or have you forgotten? I could destroy everything you've built with one phone call to the right people. What you have is fabricated evidence and empty threats." Damien's voice was exhausted, defeated in a way she'd never heard. "I'm done playing your games, Celestine." "Games? Is that what you call our history together? What we had?" Her laugh was cruel. "You're the one playing games, pretending to be in love with that little baker when we both know you'll come back to me. You always do." Ava backed away before she could hear his response, heart hammering so hard she thought she might be sick. The cupcakes felt heavy in her hands, suddenly ridiculous. What was she doing here? What was she to him, really, when he had this whole dark past with a woman who clearly still had her claws in him? She left the building without announcing herself, without confronting him, and spent the rest of the day at the bakery trying to focus on work while her mind spiraled. Our history, together. What we had, you always come back to me. Damien showed up at closing time like always, but Ava couldn't quite meet his eyes. He noticed immediately, crossing to her with concern etched into his features. "What's wrong? Did something happen? Who is she really?" Ava asked, setting down the piping bag she'd been strangling. "Celestine, who is she to you?" His jaw clenched, something like panic flashing across his face. "I told you, an old business associate who won't take no for an answer. Business associates don't talk about history and coming back to each other, Damien. You went to my office." It wasn't a question, and he didn't sound angry, just trapped. "You heard. I heard enough to know you're lying to me about who she is and what she means." Ava's voice shook, despite her best efforts to stay calm. "I heard enough to know there's something big you're not telling me." He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture frustrated and helpless. "It's complicated, Ava. It's ugly, and it has nothing to do with us, with what we have. How can it have nothing to do with us when she's clearly trying to destroy us? When you're keeping secrets from me?" She moved closer, needing to see his face. "Are you in love with her?" "What? No. God, no. How could you even think?" He reached for her, but she stepped back, and the hurt that flashed across his face was visceral. "Ava, please, you have to trust me. I want to, but you won't let me in. You won't tell me what's going on, and I can't do this if you're going to shut me out every time something difficult comes up. I'm trying to protect you from my mess," he said, voice cracking slightly. "I'm trying to keep you separate from the ugliest parts of my past, because you're the only good thing in my life, and I can't let her poison this too. By lying to me, by keeping secrets, that's not protection, Damien, it's control disguised as care." They stared at each other across the small space of her bakery, and Ava saw the exact moment he shut down, walls sliding into place behind his eyes. "I need to go," he said quietly. "I need to think." "Of course you do," she said, and hated how bitter she sounded. "Run away. That's easier than actually trusting me with the truth." He flinched like she'd slapped him. "That's not fair. None of this is fair. But I'm here, trying, asking you to let me in, and you're, what? Protecting me by treating me like I'm too fragile to handle your reality. I'm terrified you'll leave if you know the truth, he said, and the raw honesty in his voice stopped her spiral. I'm terrified that once you know how badly I've failed, how weak I've been, you'll look at me differently. Like I'm damaged goods, not worth the trouble. Ava's anger drained away, replaced by an ache that settled deep in her chest. How can you think that? After everything, how can you think I'd walk away because you're human and imperfect? Because everyone else has. He looked at her with such naked vulnerability it hurt. Everyone I've ever trusted has left or used me or proven that their love was conditional. Why would you be different? Because I am, she said, moving to him, cupping his face in her hands. Because I love you. The real you, messy and complicated and all. But Damien, you have to let me. You have to trust that I'm strong enough to handle whatever this is. For a moment she thought he'd break, thought he'd finally tell her everything. But then his phone buzzed in his pocket, and whatever resolve had been building crumbled. He pulled away gently, checked the message, and his face went carefully blank. I have to deal with this, he said. I promise I'll explain everything. Just give me a few days to handle it properly. Please. A few days, she agreed. But Damien, if you can't trust me with this, then what are we really doing? He kissed her, desperate and clinging, like he was memorizing the taste of her. I love you. Please remember that I love you, no matter what happens. The words sounded like goodbye, and when he left, Ava stood alone in her bakery and wondered if she'd just made a terrible mistake. She didn't hear from him for 2 days, and the silence was agony. She texted, called, got only brief responses that he was dealing with legal issues and would explain soon. The bakery felt emptier without him, the evenings stretching long and lonely, and she hated how quickly she'd gotten used to his presence, how much she'd come to depend on seeing his face. On the 3rd day, she went to his penthouse, using the key he'd given her weeks ago with such ceremony, telling her his home was hers now. The place was dark, but his briefcase was by the door, papers scattered across the dining table. She shouldn't have looked. She knew it was wrong, a violation of privacy, but fear made her reckless. The documents were legal contracts, dense with terminology she barely understood, but certain phrases jumped out at her. Monthly payments, non-disclosure agreement, settlement for emotional distress, and Celestine's signature at the bottom of page after page. There were bank statements showing transfers of staggering amounts, tens of thousands of dollars paid every month for the past 3 years to an account in Celestine's name. Ava's hands shook as she read, trying to piece together a story from fragments. Was he paying her off? For what? The amount suggested something serious, something he desperately wanted kept quiet. Blackmail? Hush money? Her mind spun with possibilities, each worse than the last. What are you doing? She spun to find Damien in the doorway, still in his coat, face haggard like he hadn't slept in days. Guilt and anger warred in her chest. I came to see if you were okay, and I found... What is this, Damien? What are you paying her for? His expression shuttered completely. You had no right to go through my private documents, and you have no right to shut me out of major parts of your life when you claim to love me, she shot back. Is this why she won't leave you alone? Because you're funding her entire lifestyle? It's not what it looks like. Then what is it? Because it looks like you've been lying to me about the nature of your relationship with her, about what she means to you, about everything. I haven't been lying, he said, voice rising with frustration. I've been trying to protect you from a situation that's complicated and ugly and has nothing to do with how I feel about you. Everything about you has to do with how I feel about you, Ava said, tears burning her eyes. Don't you understand? I can't love half of you, the pretty perfect parts you decide to show me. I need all of you, the darkness and the complications and whatever the hell this is. You want the truth? He moved closer, face twisted with something like anguish. Fine. Celestine was my fiancée 3 years ago. She told me she was pregnant. I proposed because I wanted to do right by our child, and then she claimed she miscarried. I was devastated. Our relationship fell apart, and when I tried to leave, she threatened to destroy my reputation with false allegations of abuse unless I paid her to stay quiet. I've been trapped in this legal nightmare ever since, paying her monthly to keep the lie from going public, bound by an NDA I can't break without risking everything I've built. The words hung between them like shrapnel, and Ava felt her entire world tilt. She was pregnant with your child? She said she was. I never saw proof, never went to appointments. She always had excuses. Looking back, I don't know if it was ever real or just another manipulation. But the miscarriage, that destroyed me. The idea that I'd failed to protect my own child, that I'd lost a chance at having someone to love unconditionally, it broke something in me. His voice cracked, and Ava saw tears in his eyes for the first time since she'd known him. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her own anger dissolving into grief for what he'd carried alone. "Because I'm ashamed," he said simply. "Ashamed I let her trap me. Ashamed I've been paying blackmail for 3 years instead of fighting back. Ashamed that I mourned a child who might have never existed. What kind of man does that make me? What kind of fool?" "It makes you human," Ava said, moving to him. "It makes you someone who was hurt and manipulated by someone you trusted." "It makes me weak," he said bitterly. "And I didn't want you to see me as weak, as damaged, as less than what you deserve." She reached for him, but he pulled away, and the rejection stung. "I need space," he said. "I need to figure out how to end this without dragging you into the legal nightmare, and I can't think clearly when you're here, when all I want to do is forget everything except how you feel in my arms." "Don't shut me out," she pleaded. "We can figure this out together." "I've already put you at risk just by loving you," he said. "Celestine knows about you now, knows you matter to me. That makes you a target, and I won't let her destroy you the way she's tried to destroy me. I'm not afraid of her." "Well, I am," he said, voice hard. "I'm terrified of what she'll do to hurt me, and the best way to hurt me now is through you. So please, Ava, just give me some time to handle this properly. Let me protect you the only way I know how." She wanted to argue, wanted to fight, but the exhaustion and fear in his eyes stopped her. "Okay," she said quietly, "handle it. But Damien, if you can't trust me to stand with you through the hard things, then we don't have what I thought we had." The pain that crossed his face was visceral, but he just nodded, and Ava left before she could break down completely. She made it to her apartment before the tears came, great racking sobs that shook her entire body. She'd known falling for him was dangerous, had known from the beginning that their worlds were too different, but she'd let herself believe anyway. Let herself hope that love could be enough to bridge the gap between his billions and her struggling bakery, his complicated past and her simple dreams. The next morning, Celestine appeared at the bakery just as Ava was opening, smile sharp as broken glass. "We need to talk," she said, sweeping inside without invitation, settling at a table like she owned the place. Ava considered throwing her out, but something in the woman's expression, a calculated cruelty that suggested she held cards Ava didn't know about, made her pause. "What do you want?" "To give you some friendly advice, woman to woman." Celestine's smile was all teeth. "Damien and I have history, deep and complicated history that goes back years. We were engaged, did he tell you that? We were going to get married, build a life together." "He mentioned you were together," Ava said carefully. "Did he mention the baby?" Celestine asked, and watched with satisfaction as Ava's face paled. "Ah, so he did. But did he tell you the whole truth? That he begged me to keep it? That when I lost it, he blamed me, said it was my fault for being too stressed, too demanding? That he broke me so completely I nearly didn't survive?" "I don't believe you," Ava said, but doubt crept in like poison. "Believe what you want. But ask yourself this: why is he still paying me every month if he's so innocent? Why does he take my calls, meet with me, maintain our connection if he's moved on? She leaned forward, voice going soft and venomous. Men like Damien don't change, sweetness. They get bored of their new toys and come back to what's familiar. I've known him for 10 years. You've known him for what, a few months? You really think you can compete with that? I'm not competing with anyone, Ava said, but her voice shook. Of course you are. And you're losing. Celestine stood, smoothing her designer dress. Do yourself a favor and walk away now, before he destroys you the way he destroyed me. Or don't, and learn the hard way that Damien Hawke only knows how to love himself. She left in a cloud of expensive perfume, and Ava stood frozen in her empty bakery, mind spinning. She wanted to dismiss everything Celestine said as lies and manipulation. But what if there was truth buried in the poison? What if Damien was more complicated, more damaged, more dangerous to her heart than she'd allowed herself to believe? Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. A photo loaded slowly, and when it finally appeared, her breath caught. Damien and Celestine standing close in what looked like a hotel lobby, time-stamped from 2 weeks ago. In the image, Celestine's hand rested on his chest, his head was bent toward hers, and the body language looked intimate. Too intimate. Ava felt something crack in her chest, something that had been fragile and hopeful and desperately trying to believe in fairy tales. She closed the bakery early, went home, and for the first time since her mother died, let herself completely fall apart. Damien showed up at her apartment that night, looking like he'd been through hell. She almost didn't let him in, but the raw desperation in his eyes when he saw her through the door's peephole made her relent. "I've been trying to call you all day," he said, stepping inside, reaching for her. She moved back before he could touch her, and she watched him absorb the rejection like a physical blow. "I need you to explain something," she said, pulling out her phone, pulling up the photo. "What were you doing with Celestine at the Carlisle Hotel 2 weeks ago?" He stared at the photo, and something like understanding and anger crossed his face. "She sent you this." "Is it real?" "Yes, but not in the way she's trying to make it look." He ran his hands through his hair, the gesture agitated. "I met with her and my lawyers at the hotel to try to negotiate an end to the payments, to the NDA, to all of it. She wanted to meet somewhere public so I couldn't threaten her. Her words, not mine. The meeting lasted 20 minutes, was entirely professional, and was the last time I'm willing to engage with her manipulation." "Your head is bent toward hers," Ava said, hating the jealousy in her voice. "Her hand is on your chest. That doesn't look professional." "Because she grabbed me as I was leaving, tried to make a scene, and I was telling her to let go of me before I called security." His eyes searched hers desperately. "Ava, please, you have to believe me. There is nothing between Celestine and me except 3 years of her extortion and my attempts to end it. The only woman I want, the only woman I love, is you." She wanted to believe him, but doubt had taken root, watered by Celestine's poison and her own deep-seated fear that she was never meant to have good things. "I need time to think, to figure out if I can do this, if I'm strong enough to be with someone whose past keeps showing up to destroy our future." The devastation on his face nearly broke her resolve. "Ava, no, please don't do this. Don't let her win by pushing me away." "I'm not pushing you away. I'm protecting myself," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Because I love you so much it terrifies me, and I don't know if that love is enough to survive whatever mess you're trapped in with her. I don't know if I'm enough." "You're everything," he said, voice breaking. "You're everything I never knew I needed, and if you walk away now, I'll survive, but I'll never be whole again. Please, Ava, please don't give up on us." "I'm not giving up," she said. I need space to breathe, to think clearly when I'm not overwhelmed by how much I feel for you." He looked at her for a long moment, something dying in his eyes, but he nodded. "Okay, if you need space, I'll give you space. But Ava, I need you to know something before I go." He crossed to her, cupped her face in his hands with infinite gentleness, thumbs stroking away her tears. "You are the only woman I have ever truly loved," he said, each word deliberate and weighted. "Not the idea of you, not what you represent, but you, Ava Harper, with your flour-dusted hair and your 3 a.m. baking sessions and your fierce determination to honor your mother's dream. You make me want to be better, to fight harder, to believe that maybe I'm worth something beyond my bank account. If you choose to walk away, I'll respect that decision. But I will spend the rest of my life regretting that I didn't fight harder, love you louder, prove to you that what we have is real and worth fighting for." He kissed her forehead, soft and lingering, and then he left, closing the door quietly behind him. Ava sank to the floor and sobbed, wondering if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. 3 days passed in a grey haze. She went through the motions at the bakery, mixing and baking and serving customers, but everything felt muted, colourless without him. She'd gotten so used to his presence, his smile, the way he looked at her like she hung the moon, that his absence was a physical ache she couldn't escape. Her apartment felt too quiet. Her bed felt too empty. Every morning she woke reaching for him before remembering he wasn't there, and the grief of that moment was like losing him all over again. On the 4th day, she found a letter slipped under her door, written in Damien's bold handwriting on heavy cream stationery. "Ava, I'm respecting your request for space, but I need you to know what's in my heart. Loving you has been the most terrifying and beautiful experience of my life. You walked into my world covered in snow and flour and completely turned everything upside down. Before you, I was going through motions, building empires I didn't care about, surrounded by people who saw only what I could give them. You saw me, just me, and you made me believe that maybe being just me was enough. I know I've given you reasons to doubt. I know my past is ugly and complicated, and I know I've failed you by not trusting you with the whole truth sooner. I was afraid, and in trying to protect you from my darkness, I pushed you away. That's on me, and I'm sorry for it in ways I don't have words to express. But Ava, I swear to you on everything I am that Celestine means nothing to me beyond being a mistake I'm desperate to correct. I've been working with my lawyers for months to build a case against her, to gather proof that she's been blackmailing me based on fabricated allegations. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to drag you into the legal nightmare, didn't want her to have any ammunition to use against you. I was wrong to keep you in the dark, wrong to think I could protect you by excluding you. You deserved the truth, and I'm sorry I was too afraid to give it to you. If you choose to leave, I'll understand. I'll hate it, I'll grieve it, but I'll understand. You deserve someone uncomplicated, someone whose past doesn't threaten to destroy your present. You deserve everything beautiful and simple and good. But if there's any part of you that still believes in us, that still wants to fight for this, please know that I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I will wait as long as it takes for you to trust me again, to trust us again, because you are worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth every risk and every fear. I love you, Ava. I'll spend my whole life regretting that I didn't fight harder to prove it. Yours always, Damien. She read the letter 3 times, tears blurring the words, heart aching with love and fear and desperate hope. She wanted to run to him, wanted to forgive everything and fall back into his arms. But Celestine's visit the next day destroyed what remained of her resolve. The woman appeared at the bakery during the lunch rush, smile cold and calculated. "I wanted to give you one more chance to walk away before things get ugly," Celestine said, settling at the counter like they were old friends. "Damien's decided to fight me legally, did he tell you that? He's gathered his expensive lawyers and his private investigators, trying to prove I'm lying about what he did to me." "What he did to you?" Ava asked, keeping her voice neutral despite the anxiety churning in her stomach. "The emotional abuse, the manipulation, the way he blamed me for losing our baby, told me I was worthless, that I'd killed his child through my selfishness." Celestine's eyes filled with convincing tears. I've been paying for 3 years, taking his money to stay quiet about how he destroyed me, because I was afraid of what he'd do if I spoke up. But I'm tired of being silent. If you don't believe me, ask him about the night I lost the baby. Ask him what he said to me in the hospital. Ask him why he pays me every month if he's so innocent." She leaned forward, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Men like Damien are very good at playing the victim, at making you think they're the ones being wronged. But I've known him for 10 years. Sweetness. I know exactly who he is when the mask comes off." She stood, smoothing her jacket, and delivered her final blow. "Oh, and one more thing. If Damien goes through with his legal threats, if he tries to publicly destroy me, I'll make sure you and your little bakery go down with him. I know people, influential people, who can make your health permits disappear, your suppliers drop you, your reputation crumble into nothing. So you might want to convince your boyfriend that silence is better for everyone involved, especially you." She left, and Ava stood frozen behind her counter, heart racing. Was it a bluff? A real threat? Could Celestine actually destroy everything she'd worked for, everything her mother had built? Fear made her hands shake as she pulled out her phone, but she didn't call Damien. She didn't know what to believe anymore, didn't know who was telling the truth and who was manipulating her. All she knew was that being with Damien had brought chaos and threats and complications into her simple life, and maybe the women at the gala had been right. Maybe she didn't belong in his world, and trying to fit there would only destroy everything she'd worked so hard to build. That night, alone in her apartment, she let herself cry until she had nothing left. She loved him. God, how she loved him. But love wasn't always enough. Sometimes love meant walking away before you both drowned. She was still sitting in the dark when her phone buzzed with a message from Damien. "I miss you. I love you. I'm not giving up on us. Even if you have. Sleep well, beautiful." She fell asleep clutching the phone, tears still wet on her cheeks. The 5th day without him, Ava woke with a strange clarity. Something about Celestine's story didn't sit right. Felt too rehearsed, too perfectly calculated to hit every insecurity Ava had. The tears had seemed real, but the words beneath them felt scripted, like she'd practiced exactly what to say to cause maximum damage. Ava started digging, using her phone and laptop to search old news articles, social media posts, anything she could find about Celestine Vale and her relationship with Damien. What she found made her stomach drop. There were photos from 3 years ago, Celestine and Damien at various events, looking happy and perfect together, but the timeline didn't match what Celestine had said. She'd mentioned losing the baby and Damien's abuse, but the photos showed them at a gala 4 months after the supposed miscarriage, his arm around her waist, both smiling for cameras. Would he have stayed with her, brought her to public events, if he'd been abusive, if he'd blamed her for losing their child? She dug deeper, finding Celestine's social media from that period. The woman had posted constantly, documenting her glamorous life in exhaustive detail. Ava found posts about spa days, shopping trips, vacations, all dated during the time Celestine claimed to have been pregnant. But there were no pregnancy announcements, no baby bump photos, no mention of expecting a child. For someone who documented everything, the absence was glaring. Then she found the grief posts, Celestine writing about loss and heartbreak and the pain of miscarriage. But the dates were wrong, posted 6 months before Damien said the miscarriage had happened. The timeline didn't make sense unless Celestine had fabricated the entire thing. Ava's hands shook as she realized what she was seeing. This wasn't just complicated history or different perspectives on a relationship gone wrong. This was calculated deception, a pattern of manipulation designed to trap Damien and now to destroy Ava's trust in him. She needed more proof, something concrete. Remembering the documents she'd seen at Damien's penthouse, she used the key he'd given her and let herself in, feeling guilty but determined. She went straight to his home office, a room she'd rarely entered, and started searching. She found the private investigator's report in the bottom drawer of his desk, hidden under other documents but not locked away. As she read, her blood ran cold. The report was thorough and damning. Celestine had never been pregnant. The medical documents she'd shown Damien were forgeries, created by a friend who worked in medical records and had since been fired for fraud. The miscarriage had never happened because there had never been a baby. When Damien had started asking questions, demanding to see actual medical records, Celestine had staged the entire grief narrative, and then, when he'd tried to leave anyway, threatened him with allegations of abuse that she'd carefully constructed with fake therapy records and coached witnesses. The investigator had found the therapist she'd paid to create false documentation, had statements from people Celestine had tried to bribe into lying about witnessing Damien's supposed abuse, had bank records showing payments to various people in exchange for false testimony. It was all there, a comprehensive web of lies designed to trap him in perpetual payments and silence. Damien had been gathering this evidence for 8 months, building an airtight case before going public, trying to protect himself and anyone he cared about from Celestine's inevitable retaliation. He'd been telling the truth about everything, and Ava had doubted him, had asked for space, had nearly thrown away the best thing in her life because she'd let fear and insecurity make her vulnerable to Celestine's poison. Ava sat in his office, report clutched in shaking hands, and felt her heart break and mend simultaneously. He'd been protecting her, fighting a battle alone because he was terrified of losing her to the ugliness of his past, and she'd almost let him. She pulled out her phone, dialed his number with trembling fingers. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail, his voice warm and familiar, asking her to leave a message. "Damien, it's me," she said, voice cracking. "I found the investigator's report. I know the truth now, all of it, and I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I doubted you. Sorry I asked for space when you needed me to stand with you. Sorry I let her make me question what we have. I love you. I love you so much, and I need to see you. Please call me back." She tried again an hour later, then 2 hours after that. His phone went straight to voicemail, and panic started to set in. Where was he? Why wasn't he answering? She called his office, got his assistant, who sounded surprised to hear from her. "Miss Harper, I thought you knew Mr. Hawke is meeting with his legal team today. They're preparing to file a formal complaint against Miss Vale, charges of fraud, blackmail, extortion. He's been at the law offices since this morning." Relief and pride flooded through her. He was doing it, finally fighting back, choosing truth over silence, even though it meant potential public scandal, meant dragging his private pain into legal proceedings, meant risking everything to be free. "Do you know which law firm?" Ava asked, already grabbing her coat. The assistant gave her the address, and Ava was out the door before she'd even hung up. She had to get to him, had to tell him she believed in him, that she was sorry, that she wanted to stand with him through whatever came next. She was halfway to the subway when her phone rang with an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Ava Harper. The voice was female, professional, unfamiliar. "Yes. Who is this?" "My name is Detective Sarah Martinez with the NYPD Fraud Division. I'm calling because your name came up in an investigation we're conducting into Celestine Vale. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" Ava's heart hammered. "What kind of investigation?" "Miss Vale is currently under investigation for multiple counts of fraud, extortion, and blackmail spanning the past 5 years. We've been building a case for months with cooperation from several of her victims, including Damien Hawke. I understand you've had recent contact with Miss Vale. Is that correct?" She came to my bakery. Twice. The last time she threatened me, said she'd destroy my business if Damien didn't drop his legal action against her. Did you record that conversation by any chance?" "No, Wait." Ava stopped walking, realization dawning. "Actually, yes. My bakery has security cameras. They record audio. It would have captured everything she said." Miss Harper, would you be willing to provide that footage to our investigation, and possibly testify if this goes to trial? Ava didn't hesitate. Absolutely. Excellent. I'll send an officer to collect the footage this afternoon. And Miss Harper, for what it's worth, Damien Hawke has been incredibly cooperative with our investigation, and everything he's told us has checked out. He's a victim in this, not a perpetrator, and we're committed to making sure Miss Vale faces consequences for what she's done. After the call ended, Ava stood on the busy Manhattan sidewalk, people flowing around her like water around a stone, and felt a fierce pride settle in her chest. Damien had been fighting, had been building a case not just for himself but to stop Celestine from doing this to anyone else. He was brave and principled and everything she'd hoped he was, and she'd almost lost him because she'd let fear win. Not anymore. She made it to the law offices 20 minutes later, breathless and determined. The receptionist tried to stop her, explaining Mr. Hawke was in a confidential meeting, but Ava must have looked unhinged enough that the woman finally relented and called up to the conference room. 5 minutes later, the elevator opened and Damien stepped out, and the sight of him made her heart stutter. He looked exhausted, beautiful, wary, hope and fear warring in his expression as he took her in. "Ava," he said, voice rough. "What are you doing here?" "I found the report," she said, moving toward him. "I know everything, the fake pregnancy, the blackmail, all of it. And Damien, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I doubted you, sorry I let her get into my head, sorry I wasn't stronger." "You have nothing to apologize for," he said. But he didn't move to touch her, like he was afraid she might disappear if he reached out. "Celestine is a professional manipulator. She's been doing this for years to multiple people. You had every reason to doubt based on what she showed you, what she told you. But I should have trusted you," Ava insisted. "I should have believed in what we have instead of letting my insecurities make me vulnerable to her lies." "I should have told you the truth from the beginning," he countered. "I should have trusted you enough to let you in instead of trying to protect you by keeping you in the dark. We both made mistakes, Ava. The question is, can we forgive each other and move forward?" She closed the distance between them, cupped his face in her hands, felt him lean into her touch like he was starving for it. "I love you," she said clearly. "I love you, and I believe in you, and I want to stand with you through whatever comes next. The legal battle, the potential publicity, all of it. I'm here, I'm not going anywhere." Something broke in his expression, relief and joy and love flooding in. "You mean that?" "Every word. I was an idiot to ask for space. I should have been fighting with you, not running from fear." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe, face buried in her hair. "I thought I'd lost you," he said, voice muffled and shaking. "I thought she'd won, that she'd poisoned what we had beyond repair." "Never," Ava said fiercely. "She doesn't get to win. We do." He pulled back enough to kiss her, desperate and relieved and full of everything they'd almost lost. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I'm filing charges today," he said. "Fraud, blackmail, extortion, all of it. It's going to be public and potentially ugly, and Celestine will try to destroy me in the court of public opinion before the legal case even starts. Are you sure you want to be part of that?" "Absolutely sure," she said, "and actually, I have something that might help. She came to my bakery and threatened to destroy my business if you didn't drop the legal action. I didn't realize it at the time, but my security cameras recorded the whole conversation. The hope that flared in his eyes was beautiful. You have her threatening you on tape, video, and audio. I already talked to Detective Martinez. She's sending someone to collect it this afternoon." Damien laughed, the sound surprised and genuine and full of relief. "You're incredible, do you know that?" "Absolutely incredible." "I'm terrified," she admitted, "but I'm more terrified of losing you than I am of whatever she can throw at us. We'll face it together," he promised. "No more secrets, No more trying to protect each other by keeping each other in the dark. We're a team, okay? Whatever comes, we handle it together. Together, she agreed, and sealed the promise with a kiss. He had to return to his meeting, but before he went, he pulled her close one more time. "Thank you," he whispered against her hair, "for believing in me, for fighting for us. You have no idea what that means." "I think I do," she said, "because you did the same for me. Every time I doubted myself, every time I felt like I didn't belong, you made me believe I was worth fighting for." "You are," he said fiercely. "You're worth everything." As she left the building, Ava felt lighter than she had in days. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, she knew that. Legal battles and public scrutiny, and whatever desperate moves Celestine made in her corner would test them both. But they would face it together, and that made all the difference. Her phone buzzed with a text from Damien. "Dinner tonight? I want to celebrate having you back where you belong, with me." She smiled, typing back, "Absolutely. Your place or mine?" "Mine. I want to make you dinner, take care of you, and then spend several hours showing you exactly how much I missed you. Fair warning, I'm planning to be very thorough." Heat flooded through her, anticipation curling low in her belly. "I'm counting on it." That evening, as she prepared to see him, Ava looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. A few months ago, she'd been drowning in loneliness and debt, invisible to the world, convinced her life would never be more than survival. Now she was loved by a man who saw her, really saw her, who fought his own demons to be worthy of what they were building together. She'd almost thrown it away out of fear, almost let Celestine's poison destroy the best thing that had ever happened to her. But she'd fought back, had chosen trust over terror, and now she got to walk into his arms, knowing they were stronger for having weathered the storm. The answer, Ava knew as she headed to his penthouse with hope singing in her veins, was always, always to rise. Damien was waiting for her when she arrived at his penthouse, the door opening before she could even knock, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. He'd changed from his suit into dark jeans and a soft sweater that made him look younger, more vulnerable, and the hunger in his expression was barely leashed. "Hi," she said, suddenly nervous despite everything they'd already shared. "Hi yourself." He pulled her inside, closed the door, and pressed her against it in one smooth motion, mouth finding hers with desperate intensity. "I've been going crazy without you," he murmured between kisses. 5 days felt like 5 years. "I'm sorry," she whispered, hands fisting in his sweater. "I'm so sorry I pulled away." "Stop apologizing," he said, pulling back to cup her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. "We're here now. That's what matters. And Ava, I need you to know something before we go any further." The seriousness in his tone made her still. "What?" "I filed all the charges today. Fraud, blackmail, extortion, everything. The police are going to arrest Celestine tomorrow morning, and it's going to be all over the news by tomorrow afternoon. My lawyers are confident we have an airtight case, especially with your security footage, but she's going to lash out. She's going to try to drag me through the mud publicly before the trial even starts." He searched her eyes intently. "I need to know you're really ready for what that means, for the scrutiny, for the gossip, for potentially seeing our relationship dissected in tabloids." Ava reached up to cover his hands with hers, holding them against her face. "I'm ready. I'm scared, but I'm ready, because being without you these past 5 days was worse than any tabloid could ever be." The relief that flooded his features was beautiful. "I love you so much." He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring, and she melted into him with a sigh that made him groan against her mouth. "I made dinner," he said, "but suddenly I'm not very interested in food." "What are you interested in?" she asked. Even though the evidence of his interest was pressed firmly against her hip, his eyes darkened, that predatory look she loved crossing his face. "I'm interested in taking you to my bedroom, stripping off every piece of clothing, and spending the next several hours reminding you exactly who you belong to. Heat pooled low in her belly. That sounds like an excellent plan. He swept her up into his arms like she weighed nothing, carrying her toward his bedroom while she laughed and clung to his shoulders. I can walk, you know. I know, but I've been fantasizing about carrying you to my bed for 5 days, and I'm not wasting another second. He set her down next to the massive bed, the city glittering through floor-to-ceiling windows behind them, and looked at her like she was something precious and profane all at once. Wrap your legs around me, baby. I want to feel you everywhere, while I remind you exactly who you belong to. She shivered at the command in his voice, at the promise of what was coming. He helped her out of her coat, then her sweater, taking his time with each layer, pressing kisses to newly exposed skin. When she stood before him in just her bra and jeans, he made a sound low in his throat that was pure masculine appreciation. He made love to her with focused intensity, bringing her to climax twice before finally letting himself follow, and the feeling of him pulsing inside her, the sound of her name torn from his throat in that moment of release, was the most beautiful thing she'd ever experienced. They lay tangled together afterward, hearts racing, skin slicked with sweat, and Ava felt more at peace than she had in days. This was right. This was where she belonged, and she'd been a fool to ever doubt it. "Stay tonight," he murmured against her hair. "Stay every night. Move in with me." She pulled back to look at him, startled. "Damien, we just got back together." "I know, and I don't care. I've spent 5 days in this bed without you, and it felt wrong, empty. I want to wake up with you every morning, come home to you every night. I want your chaos, and your flower-covered clothes, and your 3 a.m. baking sessions. I want all of it, all of you, here, with me." He cupped her face, expression vulnerable. "I know it's fast. I know we're still figuring things out, but Ava, I'm so sure about you. Say yes. Okay. Okay? Yes, I'll move in with you, but I'm keeping the bakery, and I'm going to get flour on your expensive furniture, and sometimes I'll need space even when we're living together." He grinned, brilliant and boyish. "I'm counting on all of that, especially the flower part. It's become a signature look for you." She smacked his chest playfully, and he caught her hand, brought it to his lips, kissed each finger with reverent attention. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for taking another chance on me, on us. Thank you for not giving up when I was being an idiot. You weren't being an idiot. You were being human. And I love every human, messy, complicated part of you." They made love again, slower and sweeter, before finally getting up to eat the dinner he'd made, wearing nothing but his shirt and her underwear, sitting on his kitchen counter and feeding each other like teenagers. It felt normal and domestic and absolutely perfect. The peace lasted exactly 12 hours. Celestine's arrest hit the news the next afternoon, and within hours her publicist had released a statement painting her as the victim of a vindictive ex using his wealth and power to destroy her. The tabloids ran with it, headlines screaming about billionaire bullies and powerful men silencing women. Damien's phone exploded with calls from reporters, business associates, board members demanding explanations. Ava watched him handle it with grace and control, issuing a carefully worded statement through his lawyers, letting the evidence speak for itself, refusing to engage in a public mudslinging match. But she could see the toll it took, the way his jaw stayed clenched, the exhaustion that crept into his eyes. "Come here," she said on the third night of Media Circus, pulling him away from his laptop where he'd been reading yet another hit piece. "You need a break." "I need to control the narrative," he said, but let her pull him to the couch. "You need to remember that the truth is on your side, and that this will pass." She settled into his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. "The people who matter know the real story. Everyone else is just noise." He buried his face in her neck, breathing her in. "I hate that you're being dragged into this. Some of the articles are mentioning you now, speculating about our relationship, questioning your motives for being with me." "Let them question," she said firmly. "I know why I'm with you. You know why I'm with you. That's all that matters." "You're so much stronger than I gave you credit for," he said, pulling back to look at her. "I was trying to protect you from this, but you don't need protecting. You're a warrior." He kissed her, soft and grateful. "What did I do to deserve you?" "You carried my wedding cake in a snowstorm," she said, smiling. "And you've been carrying my heart ever since." The preliminary hearing happened 2 weeks later, and Ava sat in the courtroom watching Damien present his evidence with calm professionalism. The private investigator testified, laying out the web of lies Celestine had constructed. The therapist she'd paid off testified under immunity, admitting to fabricating records. The security footage from Ava's bakery played for the judge, Celestine's threats clear and damning. By the end of the day, Celestine's lawyer was scrambling, and the judge had ordered her held pending trial on multiple felony charges. When they left the courthouse, Damien pulled Ava into his arms right there on the steps, in front of cameras and reporters and everyone, and kissed her like she was oxygen. "It's over," he said against her lips. "The legal part is just beginning, but the hold she had on me, that's over. I'm free." "We're free," Ava corrected, and felt the truth of it settle into her bones. The media attention faded over the next few weeks as new scandals captured public imagination. Damien's business partners, seeing the evidence, rallied around him. The narrative shifted from powerful man bullying his ex to victim finally getting justice after years of abuse. It wasn't perfect. There were still people who believed Celestine's lies, still articles questioning Damien's character. But the truth was winning, slowly but surely. Life settled into a new rhythm. Ava moved into the penthouse, bringing her small collection of belongings and transforming his minimalist space into something warmer, more lived in. She kept the bakery running, with Damien often showing up to help close, and the normalcy of it, the beautiful mundane routine of loving and being loved, felt like the greatest gift she'd ever received. One evening, about 6 weeks after Celestine's arrest, Damien took her on a walk through Central Park, bundled against the cold, hands linked between them. They walked in comfortable silence until he stopped at a bench overlooking the lake, the city skyline glittering in the distance. "This is where I used to come when I was younger," he said, settling on the bench and pulling her down beside him. "When my parents were fighting, or I felt particularly alone, I'd come here and watch the water and try to imagine a different life." "What did you imagine?" she asked softly. "Someone to share it with, someone who saw me, not the money or the name, just me. Someone who made loneliness feel like a choice instead of a permanent condition." He turned to face her fully, and the love in his eyes stole her breath. "I imagined you, Ava. I didn't know it then, but every dream I had of partnership and connection and home, I was dreaming of you." Her throat went tight with emotion. "Damien, you saved me," he continued, voice rough. "Not from Celestine, though you did that too. You saved me from myself, from a life of going through motions without feeling anything real. You taught me that love isn't something to fear, but something to fight for." He slid off the bench, and it took her a moment to realize he was kneeling, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "Marry me, Ava. Make this official. Make this forever. I'm not asking you to be part of my world. I'm asking if I can be part of yours. I want to wake up in our bed, help you bake at 3 a.m., grow old, covered in flour and sugar, and absolutely drowning in love." She stared at the ring, a simple, perfect diamond that caught the light and threw rainbows, and felt tears stream down her face. "I'm scared of losing myself in your life. Of becoming just an accessory to the great Damien Hawke instead of Ava Harper, baker and business owner, and her own person." He reached up to cup her face, thumbs wiping away her tears. "Then don't. Keep the bakery, keep your dreams, keep every part of yourself that makes you who you are. I fell in love with Ava Harper exactly as she is. I don't want you to change or shrink or become someone else for me. I just want the privilege of standing beside you while you become even more yourself, want to support your dreams the way you've supported mine." His voice cracked slightly. I'm not asking you to be part of my world. I'm asking if we can build a new world together, one where we're partners in every sense. Please say, yes. She looked into his eyes, saw the vulnerability and hope and absolute certainty reflected there, and felt her fear dissolve like sugar in water. Yes, she said, laughing through tears. Yes, I'll marry you. The smile that broke across his face was brilliant, incandescent with joy. He slid the ring onto her finger, perfect fit like he'd somehow known, and then he was standing, pulling her into his arms, spinning her around while she laughed and cried, and felt happiness so big it couldn't be contained. I love you, he said, setting her down, pressing kisses all over her face. I love you too, she said, and kissed him properly, deeply, pouring everything she felt into the connection of their mouths. The end. Hey Pride family, what do you think of Ava and Damien's story? Comment your answer below. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in my next story. Lots of love.